Hi everyone, so today we're going to talk about boundaries. Now, setting boundaries is really important for our mental health, so they can help us to reduce stress and anxiety, improve our self-esteem and self-confidence, and also help us to build healthier relationships. So every time we set a boundary, what we're doing is we're emptying a little bit of stress out of that stress bucket that can build up day to day, and we're helping to build our confidence in being able to stand up for essentially what we want and what is important to us, and to help us to function more rationally and feel better in ourselves. So there are three different types of boundaries. So physical boundaries in terms of personal space, privacy, touch; emotional boundaries in terms of protecting your emotional and mental well-being and not taking on the burdens of other people; and mental boundaries in terms of respecting different opinions, thoughts and beliefs. Digital boundaries as well is another one. It can be a fourth one in terms of screen time, social media. So some signs that you may need to set healthy boundaries can be that you are feeling a lot of resentment, that you are feeling overwhelmed, that you're feeling anxious, that you have difficulty saying no to things, whether that is work, whether that is friends or family, whether that is situations, events, or maybe you're feeling drained after having interactions with people. So recognizing how to set those boundaries. So first of all, start to think about recognizing your limits. So is it, for example, that you feel that you have overwhelmed yourself with doing too much over the festive period? Have you got too many plans that the thought of it is making you feel resentful and anxious? Naturally, you feel that putting a boundary in place would improve your mental well-being over the next couple of weeks. Is it in terms of work? So for example, have you taken on too much at work? Would it be helpful to put some boundaries in place in terms of timelines and delegation? It can be in terms of family members and relationships that we have, and actually how much we take on from other people. There are so many ways in which we can start to implement boundaries. So yes, first of all, recognise those limits. So start to have a think about actually what you feel is causing you stress at the moment, and actually where you're at with that and what changes you would want to make. When we're starting to think about how we can put these limits into place, we can start to think about using I statements. Now, what I mean by this is always addressing who you're talking to or that situation where you're setting a boundary with I. So, I am having a rest day today. I am finding it hard at the moment, so therefore, could you help me to delegate these tasks a little bit? Always being clear and assertive. So this is what I want, this is what's going to happen, and speaking freely, being able to say what you want. And there's a association that sometimes that can be selfish, but it's not. As long as we're not going in and we're being rude to people, it's not being selfish. It's just about thinking about how we can reduce our own stress levels, which is going to have that positive impact on ourselves. And as long as we are doing that in a polite, assertive and proactive way, then that's generally not a problem. Always start small as well. So it's not that if we haven't ever set any boundaries before that we go in and we suddenly set all these boundaries. That's not possible and it's not realistic. It's all about building small steps to build your confidence with being able to say no to things or push back a little bit on things or be clear on what you want. So it's just a small step. So maybe that small step at work might be finishing on time and saying to your boss that you need to go at a particular time. Obviously, these are all complete examples here. There's so many different ways in which we can start to implement those boundaries. And of course, it will feel difficult at first because we're not used to doing it. And we have that pathway in our brain, which is really, really embedded for saying yes and taking on responsibility or taking on other people's burdens. And it's really easy to go down that pathway. So when we start to build those new pathways, it's uncomfortable at first, but the more and more we do it, the easier it does become. It is okay to change these boundaries over time as well. Remember, whatever we do as humans is always changeable. Nothing is set in stone. So actually, once you start to feel more comfortable in the boundaries that you have set, it's okay to then change them and take a step back and reassess. Now, sometimes when we're setting boundaries, we may find that we deal with resistance from people or situations. So common reactions as we start to set boundaries with others may be guilt tripping, that we are made to feel guilty for setting those boundaries, or resistance from people, particularly when you've been what we refer to as a people pleaser. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And we're always used to saying yes to situations. People can find it a little bit of a shock that actually you're pushing back and saying no. So the way to deal with this, firstly, to stay calm, reiterate your boundaries, be assertive, and remember the positive difference that it will make to you in the long term. So that short-term discomfort of setting that boundary or saying no to someone is going to have that effect on you long term. So if you imagine a big bucket full of worries, full of day-to-day tasks and activities that have built up, and actually that positive action of just saying no, or that positive action of changing a routine, that positive action of delegating, that positive action of contact with a friend or family member can significantly reduce the amount of stress in that bucket for you in order to be able to help you to think more clearly, feel less anxious, cope with things in a much better way. Now, people pleasing is a term that is often used, and all that means is that if you're a people pleaser, that you generally don't put those boundaries in place with yourself and you do what's being asked of you to the detriment of yourself. So just worth having a little think today about actually how do you think that you could start to implement some boundaries in small steps? And now this festive season, festive period is a really good time just to have a little think about that, because people often do find themselves at this time of year feeling particularly overwhelmed, too many plans, busy, particularly tricky relationships with friends and family, that maybe you do want to just start thinking about how you can start to implement boundaries and say no a little bit more. Hope that helps.